Good morning. Thank you for joining PPI Group as we present and hopefully address your questions surrounding the new Autodesk subscription model. My name is Wendy Finch. I'm the marketing manager here at PPI Group, and I'm very pleased for the opportunity to bring to you today's presentation. PPI Group is an Autodesk Gold Partner value-added reseller for over 25 years. We specialize in the AEC industries, with offices in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. We offer the Northwest's largest training and certification centers with a comprehensive list of classes and consulting opportunities. So should you have the needs, we hope that you'll call us. We are recording this webinar and it'll be made available on our YouTube channel as well as our website within a day or two. And at the conclusion of our presentation, we'll be addressing your questions live. So please utilize the chat box on the GoToWebinar menu bar. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to read them aloud and hopefully get them answered for you. So without any further delays, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. Directly from Autodesk is Kim Renshaw. Kim is the director of the North America VAR Channel, where she leads a team responsible for working with all value-added resellers in the U.S. and Canada. Kim has also been recognized by CRN as a member of the Power 100, Most Powerful Women of the Channel in 2013 and 2014. So thank you for being here, Kim, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much, and it really is a pleasure to join the PPI group today for this webcast. Today I'm really going to address at a high level some current disruptions within the AEC market due to technology advancements and provide you with further insights to the Autodesk subscription model. So let's start with what's going on within the AEC market. You know, technology has always disrupted how things are made. But today, it's also changing how they're used, sold, and serviced. And this bridges across all industries. If we take a look, we see medical devices, for example, that are produced and being customized for an individual versus being mass-produced. We see companies like the Rolls-Royce with their Power by the Hour program and how they're changing the fundamental business model related to selling jet engines. And we also see introductions into the market, like from Google. Google is not just selling Nest because they want to sell thermostats. Instead, they see Nest as a piece of the connected home and a way to expand their reach. Clearly, technology advancements have the potential to impact a wide range of businesses, including your business. Because of the disruptive technologies, buildings themselves are also changing. Physical things are connected to one another, becoming more deeply interconnected systems. The physical and digital interconnection creates a new opportunities to add value add to a built asset or space. The Nest thermostat, which I mentioned earlier, really learns how an occupant behaves and offers better environmental control and energy efficiency. This data-driven insight about how we use space is scaling up to the environments like the Midfield Airport Terminal building in Dubai. And they use sophisticated technology, not just for managing and handling baggage and selling of duty-free items, but also for efficient processing of passengers. It gives us a way to respond to the demand for high performance across so many dimensions. Occupancy levels, energy performance, and water usage are just a few examples. These connected systems will create opportunities for building owners and occupants, designers and contractors, and product manufacturers, literally the entire ecosystem, to extend their collective capabilities. In the future, buildings and their elements will generate streams of data, and these objects will be the data with analysis to form connected systems of insight. We'll understand through these linkages how spaces and structures perform in terms of their systems, both environmentally and economically. We'll have more insight and control from any place at any time to reduce energy consumption, build more efficiency, develop social interactions, and be more responsive to the spaces. This vision can be as big as the industry wants it to be. We can see the bigger impact of each small decision we make in design, in construction, in operation, and in the occupation, and how it has an impact going forward. Now, you may have some customers today that are leveraging some of these advancements and how they're viewing their needs and requirements for building spaces and managing them. If you don't have customers today, I assure you in the near future, you will be getting these types of requests from customers. The real key thing that you want to be taking a look at is how are you leveraging the technology that's available to you today to ensure that your firm is competitive and it's able to differentiate yourself and provide clients the most cutting-edge advancements and benefits in terms of their spaces and buildings. You know, underlying these changes is also an evolution in the technology itself used to design things. At Autodesk, we divide this evolution into 3 technology eras: the era of documentation, optimization, and connection. Now, the era of documentation was focused on digitizing existing processes and managing the data that resulted. You know, it provided efficiencies, but it really didn't fundamentally change the processes. The era of optimization provided new ways to solve problems that could not be solved effectively underneath the traditional development and physical prototyping processes. This allowed companies to increase their capabilities and reduce costs and time to market. Now, the third era, the era which we currently have entered into, is the era of connection. And the era of connection extends the ability of companies to connect their business processes and collaborate with stakeholders, and to change the way they operate, to transform from a product-only business to an enterprise model where products become platforms for services. You know, we see this across a number of AEC firms even today, where they have gone beyond the design or the builds, design builds, or just the construction of the facility, where they're actually working with those clients to manage the facilities, keep them updated, and maintain records as the building evolves. You know, it's important to realize that each era incorporates the eras that came before. It's not as if documentation goes away when a company adopts optimization. And similarly, a company that moved into the era of connection still optimizes products during the development. The key takeaway you should have is what is changing is that the capabilities you need to compete are ramping up. Now, I've talked a little bit about the disruption within the market and what it means for the building, design, and construction. So let me break it down just a little bit further. There are 3 major disruptions that are categorized or really impacted in this new era for the built environment. And these are going to have a big impact on building, design, and construction. But it also makes sense to think about them in these 3 terms: production, demand, and products. The means of production is where we think about how we deliver buildings, both intellectually and physically. And this is changing. There's a shift in our attitudes about what intellectual property means, about who contributes to it and who owns it. Cloud and mobile technology means we can design anywhere and everywhere and with anyone we choose. Now, when we talk about demand, what I mean by that is how customers want to interact with their space, how occupants drive what they need in a building, and what we produce in a design. This is also evolving. Clients want high-quality projects that benefit from collaboration and achieve and have an excellent balance between costs, project risks, and rewards. Now, the third item kind of defined itself by products, and what I mean by that is the buildings, the assets, as well as the design that we use to construct them. Whether that's a piece of equipment, a system, or a whole building, what we are seeing is a huge change in production, the nature of demand, and the definition of the products. And this is happening because the digital and the physical worlds are becoming more deeply entwined. Now, because disruption, as it always does, is creating a new era also of competition. And this era can be categorized by a couple of different segments. First, it's about unlimited processing power. You will need that to solve complex problems. And again, if you're not doing that today, you will see that need in the near future. You'll also see what will be a seamless connection of talent so that the best ideas can come forward and are considered. Now, intellectual digital connectivity of buildings is also going to unlock new forms of value and opportunities within the market. Now, when we talk about capital, it's really interesting because it's also going to free access to capital by reducing risk, and it'll make it more possible to access the sources of alternative financing like crowdfunding. These capabilities are going to be available to any company, regardless of size, type, or location. The barriers to access will be low. So to kind of summarize, again, regardless of the size of your firm, where you're located, or the type of work that you do, you will have access to unlimited processing power, a broader talent pool to collaborate with, and you'll also be able to reap benefits and find new opportunities as we see the digital and the physical begin to merge. Now, along with this, we're also seeing that subscription is becoming the new norm. Now, this is not unique to Autodesk or even to software. And even though I talk in reference about disruptions within the AEC market, that doesn't mean it's a negative thing. Disruption can also bring along many positives. And I think the biggest opportunity is, again, to be able to access information and your work processes from anywhere at any time in the way that you'd like to access it. So let me back up for a minute, because we see many of these same benefits, and particularly around a subscription base, in many of our personal lives. You know, newspapers is a great example, and we see many shifts within the news media industry and market. But if I just focus on newspapers, many of you still may have a newspaper delivered to your home each week or each day, and you can get the current news as it arrives on your doorstep. Many customers, though, are now starting to subscribe to their news digitally. And again, kind of the meshing of the physical and the digital. They can access the news from anywhere, anytime, and get up-to-date information. In fact, I can be traveling away from home and still, with a digital subscription, get access to my local community news as it's happening, and I don't have to wait till I return and collect the newspapers and begin to get caught up. Now, a couple of other places we see this is even around entertainment. You know, the days of being able to say, hey, let's choose Friday night as the movie night, and you go down to a local brick-and-mortar store, and you see if the newest release is available for you to rent, to take home and watch. Some of you still may be doing that, but a high number of people have shifted to subscribing and streaming data. I can choose whatever movie I want to watch, when I want to watch it and start it, and can do it from anywhere and across multiple devices. Again, the convenience of being able to access data from anywhere at any time from a multiple number of devices. Now, I'm going to share one other example with you, and this is one I've experienced and I kind of chuckle a little bit about, but I think it really also paints a picture of the conveniences of leveraging the same technology but from a new way. So a number of years ago, I purchased a new car, and I actually paid, and I had a navigational system put into the car. Great asset. Particularly, I live in the Atlanta market, and it really comes in handy there. And it's very effective. But in the last couple of years, I have switched from utilizing the navigational system built into my car to actually accessing it from my smartphone. So I'm still leveraging the great technology of the navigational system, but now I get more flexibility and additional benefits. In fact, it's funny, when I get in my car, I actually have a phone mount that mounts right in front of my navigational screen. And why do I do that? Because now not only do I know how to get from point A to point B, but I can get additional real-time information in terms of where there are accidents or slowdowns. But another huge advantage that I have, with the built-in system to my car, I need to be sitting in my car to figure out what my route would be and what time I should leave. Now, with the flexibility of leveraging the data remotely, I can be sitting in my office, decide what my route's going to be, see where the heavy traffic patterns are, and be able to confirm what time I should leave. I'm not tied to having to be sitting in my car to get the information I need. So these are just a few examples, and we see conveniences in a number of ways of where we're now able to access data and information and processes at our fingertips, regardless of where we're at, to make our lives easier and also be a little bit more productive and efficient. Business is no different, and as I shared, a subscription-based model is not new to Autodesk. In fact, we have been having a subscription-based model for quite a while. We're making a shift to further enhance that, and that's what I want to talk with you about today. So let me drill into the subscription models at Autodesk a little bit further and draw you a parallel, because there's really 3 different types of subscription we offer. We offer for customers who have permanent licenses, where you have purchased a license and you have installed it on your machine, and you also store your data there, what we call a permanent license. We have maintenance subscription for that. And we have been carrying a subscription base for quite a number of years for customers to receive the current updates and support and additional benefits to those permanent licenses. Things like previous use or home use are a couple of other examples that the subscription to your permanent license brought you. Now, last year, we switched to a complete subscription base for updates on your permanent licenses. So last year, we discontinued upgrades for permanent licensing, which I'm sure you are all aware of. What you may not be aware of is a couple of years ago, we actually started to introduce our desktop subscription-based licensing. And we introduced these in a couple of markets that really had that need and were further advanced in terms of doing project-based and wanted that flexibility in terms of their licensing. So this isn't something we've just newly introduced in the last few months. Again, we have been not only providing licenses that were also provided as a permanent as a desktop subscription, but we were also introducing new technologies under the desktop subscription model. So our InfraWorks 360 bundle is a great example of one recently brought to the market and only available under the desktop subscription model. Now, I want to share a little bit about how this subscription model works, because the third delivery method we have is via a cloud-based solution. And desktop is slightly different from the cloud-based, and I want to help you understand and know those distinctions. So if I go back and talk about the permanent licenses that we've had, that license was tied to an asset, meaning it had an IP address tied with the license. It was tied to a machine unless you had it set up on a network, and still then it was tied to certain machines. So whoever came to work on that machine could use the software. Underneath the desktop subscription model, this is actually the license is tied to the user. So if I subscribe to a license of Revit, for example, I can load that software on as many assets that I have. I download and the software resides on my machine. My data resides on the machine. But it gives me a lot more flexibility, and I don't have to worry about how many times it's been loaded because it's tied to myself as a user. Now, I'll talk about some of the other benefits that come with it that really distinguish it over a permanent license, but I do want to share that many of the subscription benefits, if not all that you see in maintenance, are included in your desktop subscription. So you get the most, when the newest release comes out, it gets delivered to you. As I shared, you have more flexibility that I can install it. Since it's tied to a user, I can install it to as many devices as I'm going to be using. It allows me access to previous use. There's no need for a work use and a home license use because, again, I can install it wherever I as a user want to be using it. The third way that Autodesk has delivered technology is via cloud applications, and things like A360 or Fusion 360 are two examples of products we are bringing to market that are truly cloud-based. So the key focus really for our conversation here is around the permanent licenses and the desktop licenses, but I did want to share with you that desktop license is not equal to a cloud-based. So again, your software and your data resides directly on your machine. Now, one of the other benefits that desktop brings is what we call a low cost of entry. And I talked about technology being accessible and making sure that you are leveraging the most current software. It might even be a new solution from Autodesk that you might need for a product. Desktop subscriptions allow a very low cost point of entry to be able to use a new technology or solution on a particular project, or to pilot it to see if you want to incorporate it into your company's work processes. The permanent licenses, which you might be very familiar with, had a very high cost of entry, meaning your initial cost was much higher than what you would see on the desktop. Now, when we talk about costs, one thing I want to share with you is if you have your permanent licenses, if they're not on a current release on maintenance, I highly encourage you to get them onto your maintenance subscription. This will ensure that you have all the new updates coming, the benefits of subscription, as well as the support and some cloud credits. Now, you have an option to have a 1-year maintenance subscription on that, or you can extend it to a 2- or 3-year contract. That assures you to lock down today's pricing for the next 2 or 3 years and ensure that your contract stays current. Now, you have those same benefits for the desktop subscriptions, except you have a few additional ones. Underneath the desktop subscription, particularly when we talk about flexibility of access to technology, you may see fluctuation within your staffing or requirements to deliver on certain projects. The flexibility of the desktop subscription model allows a customer to subscribe to the software for 30 days, for a quarter, for a year, or you can extend it to a 2- or 3-year model. And again, this allows you to scale up and scale back very cost effectively, as there might be some influx in your workloads. Now, there are a couple of key dates that I want to share with you, and I'm sure that the PPI group has made you aware of these, but I want to touch on them and share a couple of additional points that have come up from questions of customers. So the first date that I want to share with you is January 31st. So that's just right around the corner. We're just about 60 days out from it. And January 31st will be the last day that you will have an opportunity to purchase new seats of most of our individual solutions as a permanent license. So what do I mean by an individual solution? That means that your license allows you access to one product. You have an individual license of, say, AutoCAD, or of Revit, or of Civil 3D. The license has one product to it, and this date will be the last time you have an opportunity to purchase additional or new seats. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind: if you have permanent licenses of any of these solutions, after that date, you can continue using that software indefinitely. You have the licenses for the release that you currently have. If you're on subscription, which again is key, and I can't stress that enough, you'll continue to receive all the new software updates, and you can maintain that permanent software on subscription indefinitely, as long as you would like to. The key is keep the subscription contract current. Now, the second date that I want to share with you is July 31st. So we give you a little bit more longer runway. And this is the last opportunity to purchase new seats of most of our suite solutions. So our suite solutions is where you have one license and it has a collection of technology. Might have Revit in it, might have AutoCAD along with it, maybe Navisworks, depending on which building design or infrastructure design suite that you have. Again, just as with the individual solutions, this is the last date that you could purchase new seats of suites. If you own permanent licenses of suites, after this date, you can continue using them again indefinitely. And the key will be to maintain that on subscription so that you continue to receive the updates, support, and the other subscription benefits as long as you want to. If you drop your maintenance contract after these dates, you will continue to maintain that current release of software. So if you drop it after 2016, you will continue to have indefinite usage of 2016, but you will not have the benefit of getting the update. So that is why the subscription on a permanent license, our maintenance subscription, is so key. Now, many people will ask, well, why is Autodesk choosing to do this now? And there are a couple of things that I'd like to point to. One, we have slowly been making the shift with the introduction of our maintenance subscription, which really the high percentage of our customers take advantage of. We then shifted to removing our upgrades. A couple years ago, we started to introduce our desktop subscription-based solutions, as well as cloud solutions. So this has been a transition over a number of years, and really the purpose of doing it is to support many of the trends and demands from the market about needing higher flexibility and access to software for all sizes of firms, particularly with lower cost entry points, as the technologies advance and these disruptions take place. So we're really here to support the changes within the market and provide customers the opportunity to grow and change and advance as quickly as they'd like to. Now, what I'd like to do now is address maybe what are some very common questions that come up in terms of this transition or new permanent licenses having a deadline of being available. Now, I've talked about what happens after the date if you own permanent licenses, and I just want to reiterate that those licenses do not disappear. They don't go away. You have indefinite use of those licenses, and you can, again, the key is maintain it on your maintenance subscription contract. Do not let that lapse. Do not let that get late. Just keep that current and up to date, and you'll continue to receive all the benefits you have now with maintenance, as well as ongoing updates. Now, some have asked, well, what if I need to expand my licenses after these deadlines? Can I have a combination of rental or subscription licenses as well as my permanent licenses? And the answer is yes. You can maintain and run a hybrid work environment to adjust and accommodate growth within your business. Now, a key note with these deadline dates that I've shared with you are really two things that I do want to make sure you're aware of. One is, what can you do with those permanent licenses after that date? And I also want to talk about making some of your permanent licenses on a network or network activated. Maybe I'll take that one first. If you have permanent licenses today, and they're what we call standalone, they're not set up on a network, so you're not sharing them across machines within your infrastructure within the company. That is one thing that you might want to talk to the PPI group about in terms of making those network activated to give you more flexibility of how you distribute those within your office. Once we've hit the deadline of no longer selling new seats of a particular type, whether it's the individual or the suite, that will also be the end to your option to convert a standalone to a network activation. So make sure you have those conversations, because it might bring you some flexibility that you're not aware of. Now, what happens, say it's February 15th and you have a seat of AutoCAD, a permanent license, what can you do with that license? Well, if you have a seat of AutoCAD and you wanted to transition that over to a seat of Revit, for example, or Civil 3D, you want to do that before January 31st. So before that deadline, if you want to take a permanent license, single permanent license that you have now, and convert it to another type, you want to do it before that deadline. But what happens if it is February 15th and you have a seat of AutoCAD and you really need to have access to Revit? What can you do with that permanent license? Well, from February 1st to July 31st, we are continuing to sell the permanent licenses of most of our suite products. And you can take that AutoCAD and transition it over to one of our building design suites, for example, that might include AutoCAD, but also provide that Revit technology that you're looking for. After our July 31st, there will not be a path for you to migrate that permanent license to another type of permanent license because we're no longer selling permanent licenses. So if you want to make any changes, you want to do it before the deadlines and ultimately before the July 31st deadline. Now, some people have asked, well, what is going to happen to products, as the permanent licenses go away? Are some products going to be discontinued, or what's happening to our line? Now, independent of our switch to more of a subscription-based model, we had talked about our Autodesk design suite. Our AutoCAD design suite is going to be discontinued at the end of January. All of other products are going to continue, and our objective is to have all of our solutions on a subscription model. It just brings the benefits and the flexibility to the customer base. So our goal is to switch all of our products in that direction. Now, when I talk about that, some folks will ask, well, if I'm on permanent licenses, should I stock up on permanent licenses before these deadlines? And that really is a question I can't answer for you, but let me give you some things to think about. And every business is different. And so you do want to take a look at what your expectation is for growth, how you want to manage licenses. Those are just two of a number of examples of things you should consider. So with that, my recommendation is that you work with the PPI group, sit down and look at your particular business needs, what your expectations are, how you see changes coming from what your customers are requesting and how that might be changing some of your processes. And they can help you collectively lay a strategy which may include purchasing some additional permanent licenses, or it may have you running a hybrid environment of your existing permanent with new subscription-based licenses as you need them. Now, I touched on, subscription a little bit, and I just want to highlight, again, some of probably the key advantages that customers have found in subscription, and this is true whether it's a maintenance subscription contract or it's one of our desktop subscription contracts. But this is your key for maintaining and keeping your software licenses current, that you have the most current release of software. Again, there's some support that's provided in that, but particularly within the AEC market, probably one of the biggest advantages is access to previous use. So many times you will have a project that will require access to an older release of software that you have owned, and subscription allows you to still have access to that when your licenses have been upgraded. Now, one last question I do want to address, and it really is particularly with the desktop subscription, is I have heard the question asked, if I have a subscription license, if I have a desktop license of any type, does that mean I have to always be on the internet to work? And the answer to that is no. So just as many of you do today with permanent licenses, we have a new release or an updated software that comes out. You download that from the internet and you install it on your current machine. With the desktop, same thing. You purchase a desktop license. You'll go to the internet. You'll download it to your machine. You'll install it. And again, since it's tied to a user and not to an asset, you could download it as many times as you wanted for the machines that you'll be using. You'll download your license and you'll activate it, and then you can disconnect from the internet. And you can work disconnected from the internet for 30 days. About 7 days prior to that 30-day period coming to an end, you'll get an in-software notification to remind you to take a few minutes, log back in on the internet, activate and certify your license. You can disconnect. It takes just a couple of minutes, and you're off again for 30 days and not have to ping into the internet at all. So again, you don't need to be tied completely to the internet on the desktop. Now, I've shared a number of bits of information with you here today, and so you might be asking yourself, well, what do I do next? Well, there's 3 recommendations that I have, and they're actually pretty simple. One is that you review the technology that you're currently using or need to be using to really secure your capability to compete as these changing and disruptive forces are taking place within the AEC market. I highly encourage you to reach out and meet with the PPI group to really review your business specifics, meaning how do you deploy your current software, what are you using it with, what's your expected growth, how are you looking to differentiate your firms from others in terms of services that you make available. All of those components will tie into having a very effective conversation and setting a go-forward strategy for how you want to purchase and which model you want to subscribe to maintain your software under. Now, when you have that meeting comes my third point, and that's to ensure that all the stakeholders are included in that meeting. So what do I mean by that? If you currently are a user of our software, you're going to see really no change. We're talking about how the software is delivered and subscribed, but we're not talking about any changes in the software itself. But if you're on this call and you're not responsible for the deployment or the management of the licenses within the office, you would want to have somebody engage with that part of your meeting with the PPI group. If you're not responsible for actually funding or purchasing the software, and what I mean by that, if the terms OpEx versus CapEx really don't have any bearing to your responsibilities within the firm, you might want to find out who that does have some value and meaning to and have them come to that planning meeting to really address everybody's needs, not just the individual users, but how you're using, deploying, again, how you're looking to differentiate your firm. All of that plays into really a strategic go-forward plan. So that was kind of the last part that I wanted to share. And so now I'd like to open it up. I'm assuming some of you may have been submitting questions via the chat box. So I'd like to open up and see, are there any questions that can be read to me that we can capture from those on the webcast, and maybe I can answer today?
Yes, Kim, we do have a few questions, so I will prompt any other participants here on the webinar to go ahead and get those questions in now, and we'll just start from the top. And some of them came in a little bit early, so it may have already been addressed within your presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and read these again, just so that we make sure that we have clarity. So Greg asks, are upgrades to the permanent licenses for suites from individual products still available until July?
Yes, and just from a terminology standpoint, we kind of call that a cross-grade versus an upgrade, but you have until July 31st of 2016 to have an individual permanent license and cross-grade that or transition that over to one of our permanent suite solutions. So you have you've got about 8 months to be able to make that transition if that's valuable to your business.
Okay. And Dan asks, how will AutoCAD LT be affected by this change?
Well, AutoCAD LT actually has been in the forefront of being on a subscription-based solution. In fact, many of our AutoCAD LTs have already made that transition. And in some parts of the world, not in the United States or Canada, but we actually made the transition of not offering or no longer having available the permanent licenses in some countries. So they will also be impacted by the end of in the U.S. and Canada, they'll be impacted by our January 31st. So we have desktop licensing available for our AutoCAD LT products, and if you're interested in acquiring a permanent license or additional permanent licenses of that, you would want to do that by January 31st. Okay.
So we have 2 listeners or attendees who are kind of on the same thought path here. So Lars and Craig are both asking about network licensing with subscription, and what does that look like, and when will that model be available?
Great question. So if I could back up, I just want to reemphasize, so those who asked the question, bear with me just for a moment. But if you are on standalone, not networked licenses, again, I think that's something you should talk to the PPI group about, because network licenses bring some great flexibility within the work environment of how you deploy those licenses. And again, you can take an existing permanent license and make it a network-activated license for a fee, and you can do it by the deadline date. Now, the question of, I'm going to kind of address this in two ways because I'm not sure which way they may have been asking. I'll first talk about if you have a current permanent network pool of licenses, you will be able to add termed or subscription-based licenses to your network, so you'll be able to work in a hybrid environment. Currently today, our subscription-based licenses are what we would view as a single user. They're tied to one user. In the beginning of February, we'll be providing more details about our multi-user subscription-based licenses. So it will provide the flexibility that you're looking for. We wouldn't be using the word network, but stay tuned. I know the PPI group is very good about getting information out to their client base as soon as we have it available. So stay tuned on the details of that, but we understand the importance and the value that having that flexibility of deploying licenses are to our customers. So it's not available today, but here in the next about 60 days or so, you'll be hearing more information on the subscription-only licenses, our desktop licenses, and how those will be available in a multi-user mode. So I don't have details to share on that right now, other than to tell you stay tuned, more information will be coming.
Well, that's exciting, Kim. We'll be anxiously awaiting for that information for sure. Kay asks, she says that they have permanent licenses. Can we still maintain and purchase new version in the future?
Only up to those deadline dates that I shared. So after those deadline dates, you will not be able to purchase any additional permanent licenses, whether it's trying to update or even be the newest release. Your only option for purchasing new licenses after those deadline dates will be under the subscription model. And again, it's the same technology, right? It's installed onto your hardware, it's stored locally. What will be changing is how you subscribe to that license and the model which you maintain it.
Okay, so I don't see any other new questions. If you have one, please get it in here quickly so that we can answer it here live. In the meantime, up on the screen is our contact information for both the Portland office and the Seattle office, and you likely know who your account manager or your representative is, but if you don't, we certainly can direct you in that direction. And then, of course, our website, where there's a lot of additional information there. So I do have one more question here. How much difference between permanent and subscription base?
Great question.
Okay, good.
Great question. So yeah, so it's a little hard to answer because we don't provide the pricing direct, right? So if you work with the PPI group, they can give you exact numbers. But let me kind of address this from a high level because the two models are very different. On a permanent license, you have a high upfront cost, right? So if you're purchasing a new seat of AutoCAD, you're looking maybe around a $5,000 investment just to acquire the license. And then I think your maintenance subscription has a lower cost going forward, right? So, it might be around $500 or $600 in that range. On the desktop, the same technology for an AutoCAD license is a much lower cost of entry. So you can acquire a new license for, I think it's somewhere a little over $1,000. So a fraction of what a permanent license would cost you. And then its maintenance going forward is going to be a little higher. So, you need to look at, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, right? Unless you look at when you initially purchased your software, all of those upgrades if you're under that model, or your maintenance to factor out, and desktop has a lower cost of entry. So kind of an apples to oranges comparison, but if you follow up with the PPI group, I'm sure they can help you look at your specific scenario. But if I look at a start from scratch today, again, a perpetual license has a very heavy upfront cost that needs to be made. with a lower subscription cost. Desktops have a much lower fraction of the cost acquisition or upfront cost, and has a little bit higher maintenance cost going forward.
Okay. John asks about the desktop subscription and whether or not it requires cloud.
It does not require cloud. It does require, though, access to the internet to download, but because your software and your data resides on your machine, you don't have to leverage the cloud if you don't want to. Just as you have a permanent license today, you can access data in the cloud. If your organization chooses to store data in the cloud or use the cloud for computing, we've got customers today, even on permanent licenses, that leverage some of our cloud credits within their subscription contract to do renderings or calculations. So you can access the cloud and leverage its power, but you're not required to work in the cloud with the desktop. Again, it's an internet access. Download the software to your machine, and you can disconnect for the internet, as I shared earlier, for 30-day segments at a time. And then you just need to briefly ping back in to activate that license.
Okay, questions still coming in. So Greg asks, with subscription, can we still build deployments and store the software locally, or do we have to install individually from the internet?
So that's a great question, and I'm going to be honest, that is probably going to go a little bit beyond my technical expertise. I'm kind of chuckling here. When I joined Autodesk about 15 years ago, I was an application engineer, and I could have answered that question for you in a heartbeat. So if I could, I'd like to defer you to circle back with the PPI group. And again, if you are looking to have a subscription-based multi-user model, those details are to come. So they can help you kind of drill into your question a little bit further and get you the specific details that you're looking for if they're available.
And we will do that, Greg. I will make sure that I have somebody from our technical team give you a response either via email or give you a call and discuss this question with you. In fact, the person I'm going to assign is on this webcast, so you can expect to hear from us shortly on that question. And I think right now it looks like that wraps up our questions, and I don't see anything else coming in. So I think we can go ahead and safely wrap up the webinar as well. And again, our contact information, if there's something that comes to you later that you wish you had asked, please feel free. If we don't have the answer here at PPI, we will certainly reach out to Autodesk. We'll reach out to Kim, and we'll get those questions answered for you. So Kim, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and helping address some of these questions and concerns that our customers have. And we really look forward to working with each one of you moving forward and providing the best solutions that are available. So we're going to go ahead and end things now. Again, thank you so much for everybody attending. We'll make this broadcast available on demand here within the next day or so. Thanks. Have a wonderful day.